Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and good morning, Manila. We're broadcasting live from New York City, and today is a continuation of our Master's Mentoring Program. And in the spirit of the Advent season, we are going to talk about art and Christendom.
Let's just start with the image that you're seeing right now. No? So as you can see, these are supposed to be images of Jesus. So not very familiar looking, no? Uh, and and mukha silang masyadong unfamiliar in the sense that we get so used to the image of Jesus as a bearded man with long, usually straight hair. So what you see here is an early image of Christ, looking looking very Roman, no? At the time. So this was done sometime before 300 CE. That's Common Era.
It's the early Christian depiction of Jesus as the Good Shepherd.
Yes. And sometimes it is likened to Apollo, the Greek god, no, mga ganon. And this is another image of Christ being touched by the bleeding woman. No, so she gets healed in the process of touching his robe. Yung ganon. And again, it looks very Roman and clean shaven, short hair, nothing close to resembling to us to that which we're very familiar with. No? So next image. Again, no? Yeah. So these are images from the catacombs. They say partly because Christianity was one of the, it was regarded as a cult. And in many ways, it's kind of persecuted from time to time under the Roman Empire. But it wasn't always the case. So there were times na medyo open sila. But they prefer to have their worship or gatherings in the catacombs. So that one depicted it's a version of the Last Supper. And suddenly we have this, no? Christ Pantocrator. What does Pantocrator mean? It's parang a ruler of, kind of ruler of everything. Pan is lahat, no? Krator is the sovereign. So sovereign of everything, the whole universe, things like that. In other words, masyadong wide yung coverage. And this is an example of Byzantine art, no? So you can see the transition, and it's very interesting because it was at this point that Christianity becomes the imperial religion. So, and then the term Pantocrator, no? Parang it's very much consistent with Christianity being the dominant and the imperial religion. And it would be noteworthy to know that at this time, Christianity was very intolerant of other religions, and it was also very intolerant of other versions of Christianity. No? So you have to know that Christianity has always been Christianities. No? So hindi siya, it was never monolithic. In other words, there were always different versions of Christianity. Let's have the next slide, please.
Yeah.
And then eventually, this is the more familiar image of Christ to us. No? So he looks more like, he looks very European this time. No? So in contrast to the Christ Pantocrator which you just saw earlier, it is more derived from the image of Zeus. No? So it has very Greek roots. No? So, pero in contrast to the much earlier version that you saw, this time, the Christ images now all have beards, no, and mustache.
Na, Passion of Christ. Ako.
Yeah, this is the Passion of the Christ. This is the Passion of the Christ na ginawa or was produced and directed by Mel Gibson. This is based on, supposedly based on the Gospel of John. So for us who are not very familiar with the stories about Jesus, no, there are actually 4 versions. No? You have the Gospel of Matthew, the Gospel of Luke, the Gospel of Mark, and the Gospel of John. But these are only the canonized versions. Then you will realize that there are other non-canonical Gospels. No? Ibig sabihin, there are other stories about Jesus who did not or who were not included in the canons. No? So what do you notice about this painting? So siguro, well, one of the most notable thing about this painting is the figure at the center, who is Christ, no? Looks very feminine. No? Walang mustache. Can easily be mistaken for a woman if you're not familiar with what the story is about or what the title is. Diba?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nga,
So,
babae ba yan?
yes.
No?
Well, it's not supposed to be female, but I don't know. I'm sure Caravaggio is very familiar with a lot of images of Jesus during his time. So for him to deliberately represent Jesus in this manner, apparently he has his own intention. And it's not really, I mean, you have to dig up on the story behind this in order to find out why Jesus is depicted in this manner. Yan, no?
Yan, yung
so,
ito na ang Garibay painting.
So instead of being parang siguro shocked or surprised or what, the men around Jesus are laughing, no? And typical na reaction ng mga Pinoy na when they realize that they've been clinging on to a mistaken notion of what Jesus looks like. No? So this is intended to be really challenging for the viewer. No? So I mean, imagine to see Jesus in this way. No? Not only is she a woman, like what you saw in Caravaggio's work, Jesus can be a woman in that case. But this is more than just a typical woman. This is apparently a woman who works in a bar. No? So medyo, that is already suggested by the manner of her dressing. No? And that she sits with men drinking alcohol.
Pero may stigmata siya, no? Sa kamay.
Mayroon siyang stigmata because the Emmaus is actually a story where Jesus, this is already after the crucifixion. So if you're not familiar with the story of Emmaus, no, this is actually after the crucifixion, and the disciples were scattered in different places because they were scared. No? And 2 of the disciples went to a place called Emmaus, no? And this is about a day's walk from Jerusalem. So they were coming from Jerusalem, and along the way they met a stranger, and the stranger joined them in their journey. And the whole time they were having a conversation with the stranger, they didn't recognize who the stranger was, and it was only at the dinner table that they realized, well, they invited the stranger to have dinner with them, and it was only then that they realized that they've been having a conversation with Jesus the whole time. Now, if you read the story, you would be very disturbed by the implication of the story, because how can you not recognize somebody whom you know very well, no? Very close sa iyo, and then you have all this conversation with this fellow, and then not recognize him, no matter how cleverly disguised this person is, no? Makikilala nyo pa rin. So to me, the story was telling me a message, among others, especially us Filipinos. And I felt the story was telling us that we have this fixed image of what Jesus looks like. This is the other one that I saw. No? So Orozco, in this case, is instead of upholding the cross, in this time he is
Destroying.
Yes, exactly. No?
Wow.
Because the cross is a symbol of oppression. No? So again, this is actually a matter of another theological perspective. No? So parang in this case, it's a political statement where Christ is represented here as a working class figure, and he's cutting down the cross, which is a symbol of imperial oppression. So at that time, it was the imperial Rome. No? So you have to take note that Christ was crucified, by the Romans. Kasi we tend to cling on to the notion that Christ was killed by the Jews, which is parang a misreading of the story, because kasi parang yung version sa Gospels is that they're saying that the Jewish rulers didn't have a law to execute a person, on the basis of religious mga transgressions, but that is not the case at all. No? At any rate, death by crucifixion in the Roman context is a political crime. No? So those who were found to be traitors to the Roman Empire were crucified on the cross. Meron pang
Oh, ano to? Yeah.
This is a very nice image. No?
Philippine.
At any rate, this is the Black Nazarene. No? So I kind of like the image of a Black Nazarene because it's black, it's not European, but if you look closer to the image, he's actually very European. No? Only the color of the skin is black. And
we have also Santo Niño, Cebu.
Yeah, Santo Niño sa Cebu. Next image.
Virgen Dolorosa in Bukawi, Bulacan. And then we have Our Lady of La Naval de Manila, Santo Domingo Church.
Alam mo,
Nababasa eh.
Ganun ba? Sorry. Yeah. So,
eto na, England. Punta tayo sa England. Magandang usual topics talaga rin yung mga churches, no? Yung mga this beautiful churches that we see around the world.
Now, yeah, so the next image.
Oh, Notre Dame.
Notre Dame. Ano pa? So these two are examples of what you call Gothic architecture, no? Gothic art, and yeah, so that's the interior. And this was a time when the dominion of the church was absolute in Europe. No? So the church was the most powerful entity at the time. So there can be, and it was a rule that there can be no, any structure shouldn't be taller or bigger than the church building. No? If you notice, Gothic architecture emphasizes on the verticality of structure. So it emphasizes on, yung God being way up there, no? Mataas, yung ganon. And that's also the root word of Gotham City, no? Which is a fictional city in Batman, which is referring to New York. And it's all about the skyscrapers, mga ganon. It's in in reference to the verticality of the church structures in Gothic art. And Gothic actually refers to the Goths, no? The tribes in the major tribe in Europe, no? You have German, French, mga ganon, no? So yeah.
Yeah.
Anong sunod ba?
Ganda nito.
What's the next one? Oh yeah, okay.
Rome.
So at some point, there was a breakup within the Roman Catholic Church, starting with the challenge of Martin Luther, who reacted to the abuse of power by some of the clergy or high church officials or within the Roman Catholic Church, and as a result, the church was divided between the Catholics and the Protestants. So, in order to contain or stop the tide of the trend that people are getting attracted to the to Protestantism, the Roman Catholic Church called for the Council of Trent, and one of the results was to build churches which emphasizes on the foretaste of what it's like to be in the afterlife or in heaven, no? Yung ganon. So this was a reaction to the iconoclastic tawag nito yung iconoclastic tendencies within the Protestants, no? So
three-dimensional. It looks three-dimensional.
It looks three-dimensional, exactly. It's one of the features of so this is what you call Baroque, no? One of the features of Baroque art is especially in church buildings, the interior of church buildings is there's a fusion of three disciplines, that is architecture, sculpture, and painting. So there's like a seamless continuity of like you see yung mga pillars, and then on top of that you see sculptures, and then there's a continuation of the same images, but it's actually just a visual illusion. So it looks like an infinity of space, no? But these are basically paintings na lang, no? So it's really hard to tell what is three-dimensional and flat surface, no? Dahil because of the illusion created by the paintings and the way it is fused with sculpture and architecture. You know. So the whole idea really is to give you a sense of what it feels like, the promise of the church, that it mediates between the people and God, and through the church, one can have eventual access to heaven. No? Yung ganon. So parang eto, this is what heaven looks like. Parang that's the whole idea. No?
Yeah. It reminds me of a Sistina Chapel.
Yeah, but Sistine Chapel was actually painted during the Renaissance period, and it has a very different theology. You have to take note that the Renaissance was inspired by the classical worldview that emphasizes more on the centrality of humans or humanity. So just to give you an idea, no, parang it actually brings down God almost on the same level with man. No? So if you take note of the creation of man painting by Michelangelo, you see God reaching out to Adam, and Adam is almost on the same level as God. No? You have to imagine the image, but then if you're familiar with that, parang and the implication there is hindi na magkalayo, no, ang level ng Diyos at ng tao. No? So yeah, this is just to add more example to the Baroque art during this. So Baroque art is sometimes called counter-Reformation art. No, Reformation being the spread of Protestantism. So to counter that, Baroque art was instituted in many of the churches in Europe. Well, interesting. This was like 10 years ago. No? I did this painting while I did my residency in New Haven, in Connecticut. No? And
That's
I
where we
think
saw your sa OHM yan eh. That was
yes.
from the website.
Mm-hmm. And I think some of the images may not have been included, no? Kasi there are more figures in the foreground. So this is
like this one.
Yeah, there you go. Oh no. Can you go back to that? Mahirap ng balikan, no? Ito na lang. Ito, okay. Oops.
But the other one, yung kanina, that one you discussed sa Emmaus. So now this one. Yes. Teka muna, na-intriga kami. Ano ba yung, is that supposed to be Christ?
Yes. Well, it's indicated by the holes in his feet. No? So it's like, it's like Christ in an invisible cross. So like, and all the people around in the painting hardly notice his presence. No? And that's exactly what it's saying. So you have, different kinds of people. You have a general, you have like some high church figures, you have a basketball player. I mean, the whole variety of people in society. And it's like saying, well, they're all probably, some of them can be religious, probably some are not, some don't care. But all of them are oblivious to the presence of a dying and suffering Christ right in their midst. No? So that's the whole idea there. It's like they're having a good time being at the beach.
I have a question. Manny, I noticed in a lot of your paintings, yung mga mahabang nose, yan
Yeah, well, that's very typical of yung parang the idea of yung that nose taken from the story of Pinocchio. So
when they're lying, okay, we're gonna show more.
When you're lying, hahabang ilong mo. Yeah.
We're gonna show more of those paintings of Manny Garibay. Ito, na-intriga rin ako dito. This looks like an archbishop. May katabing, I don't know what this is. Kalbo, no? Ito rin. Is this a depiction? Another depiction of Christ?
Well, can be, no? Or it can be like, we have this practice of people who kind of subject themselves to a lot of pain during the Holy Week. Yung mga flagellants, that's what we call them, no? So parang they bleed themselves and then they walk in the streets and then kind of showing off how they're suffering, yung ganon. So it could be that kind of guy and then seated beside a high church official, and I don't know. They are they singing together? Are they sleeping together beside each other? Para silang, are they both snoring or what? I leave that to the viewer to decide. No? But there's like a collusion that's taking place. They're seated side by side, so it's like maybe a perpetuation of some traditions within the church.
So really, the paintings of Garibay always leave something to think about, something behind that you think about. Ayan pala,
Ayun pala, may alak pala doon.
Hawak
So
na
I forgot
tinapay.
that part. No?
Yeah,
I think this wine and bread. No?
yeah.
So, and again, that's a well-known tradition within the church. And again, well, this is a statement about a certain kind of abuse of authority inside the church. So you see maybe a cardinal, piously praying and kneeling. But the mitre, pag tinignan niyo yung kanyang mitre, mukhang there seems to be an image of a
This
parang
one.
Parang ahas, ano?
Yeah. Wow. I saw this right away, itong nasa taas.
Yeah.
Sabi, no? Funny.
Mm-hmm.
And this one is mukhang Pilipino na to,
That's supposed to be Apolinario Mabini. So it's part of a series I did where I decided, like, why do we have well, we do have saints, Filipino saints. We now have two saints, no? But they were hailed saints mainly because of their loyalty to the church, no? So parang they were not canonized mainly because they fought for the cause of freedom from the tyranny. They fought the tyranny of colonization and all that. So they were canonized as saints because of their loyalty to the colonizers. So instead of, I went in the other direction by canonizing our national heroes. And it's all part of the idea where we value our identity more if we regard it with a certain degree of sanctity. We sacralize our identity. And the reason we look down on ourselves, we don't really project ourselves proudly in terms of our identity, because our collective narrative starts with the colonization. The Philippines was discovered by Magellan. So that's how we start our collective story. And it begins with a collective shame of having been colonized. So I think we need to dig up to our past and look into the people who made sacrifices in order to redefine who we are.
You know what? In some ways,
go ahead, Doc Rom.
In some ways, your images and your paintings actually forces the viewer to really rethink a traditionally held notion or belief and really challenge it that there may be something really different that we should be entertaining. It's all evident about religion, evident about politics, but it's really in the service of really defining a certain degree of identity that's Filipino, and then really being able to be ashamed of and or being proud of.
Mm-hmm.
Miss
Yes.
Connie, feel free to ask and weigh in. Diyan pa si
Mm-hmm.
Boss Demi.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, to siguro to reinforce that idea, no. I always cite the Jews to be the direct contrast of the Philippine case, no? Or the case of the Filipino. The Jews, no matter how you look at them, whether positively or negatively, this is the only nation that I know who have persisted in their collective identity in spite of the loss of of a a homeland. No? Like you see, Israel was was just established in 1948. So for 2,000 years, you have a group of people who don't have a place called home, and yet they never lost their identity. No? I mean, it's very natural for people who lose their homeland to eventually assimilate into host countries and then ultimately lose their identity. You know, they will just be part of the masses of that particular host. But in the case of these people, they don't. No? They persist, and that's mainly because it starts with their own narrative where they define who they are in terms of how they relate with their God. So their collective identity started by sacralizing it because they have this covenant with their God, and they must never kind of uh, lose themselves. Because that would be transgressing their covenant with their God. So imagine 2,000 years wala kayong bansa, and yet you're still around, and they're most powerful because of that. No?
Parang ano yun, Rom, yung aray sa mga migrantes.
Yeah,
to discover.
that's actually the case. No, parang our main problem is there's a lot of hindi naman siguro resentment, but more of shame for being who we are. No? There's little pride in our collective identity. Oftentimes, when a Filipino figures in the international scene, we sort of attached our sense of pride with that guy. You know? Kunyari, you have Manny Pacquiao becoming a world champion. You have Pia Wurtzbach becoming Miss Universe. Suddenly, parang na-stir up na naman yung ating national pride. No? So, but these are fleeting moments, and these are like attaching your sense of identity to another person. So, parang there's no collective sense of being who we are.
Yeah. Ito namang view na to, parang revolution yata ito, or
well, this is supposed to be part of my personal history. I should have been part of this thing, but I was in another place enjoying myself. You know, I was having lunch and some drinks with a good friend of mine in a posh subdivision. And I was supposed to be part of this rally. No? So this was in January 1987, where a group of farmers were massacred by policemen in Manjola. No? So this is otherwise known as the Manjola Massacre. And so I've been doing paintings of this from time to time. So this is probably like the fourth version of this one.
Martial law, right?
No. This was after martial law, actually. Incidentally, unfortunately, this was during the time of Cory Aquino already.
Oh, man.
But the military was still very much in power. No? So it was a major dilemma, actually, for Cory Aquino because she was always besieged by the threat of a coup d'etat. So she was not in full control of the military then.
Mm,
And then
okay.
at the same time, the farmers were getting more, getting bolder, no? And they, because they felt there was more democratic space to express their sentiments, which may have been a wrong reading of the situation, because then it turned out it wasn't really the case. So their demonstration was violently, dispersed.
I noticed, no, marami kasing gumagawa ng, a lot of people are painting that topic, but I like the way this is merged. Look at how the images here were merged and vague na to obscurity and abstraction, right? So you can actually
Mhm.
see the front ones here very clearly, some of the eyes there, but
Mhm.
the rest is like obscured. And I love that style of painting. Um, wow.
Mhm.
We have to at least attempt this, Mare, Fanny, where there are
Well, actually, this is
front, and then
partly
as you go
influenced
back.
by a paint. Yeah, this is. I don't know if you're familiar with a famous painting by Francisco Goya, titled "The Third of May," where the Spaniards who instigated the rebellion against the French were lined up in a firing squad, and all those who were shooting at the rebels uh, had their backs behind the viewer, so you don't see any of them. No, and it was only the faces, or it's only the faces of those who are about to be killed that you see, their facial expression and all that. No, so this is the same. I mean, this is the same idea. No? You don't really see the policemen in the background, but there are hints that they have guns, and some of the guns are pointed at the demonstrators, and you only see the chaos and fear that's going on in the faces of the demonstrators.
And by the way, meron tayong next topic on our Valentine celebration, the Valentine birthday of Master Nemi Miranda. It's
Oh
all
wow!
human figures, the
Happy
power
birthday in advance.
of your
Yeah.
imagination using human figures. That would be next. That's exciting too. But it's very close to what you're doing. Yours are also out of imagination, right? Yung mga figures mo.
Yeah. I paint basically from imagination. I do a lot of drawing, and I realize it defines a direction in art theory by itself, because this way the creator is more in command of the outcome of the image, in contrast to if you were doing an image based on photographs or a sitter. So there's so much more freedom to direct the outcome of the image on the basis of how you want them to look like. So and plus the fact that I have a strong tendency to tell stories in my images. So the that way, like, the images are direct representations of that story that you're narrating.
Well, this one is this one has a very strong political statement, and not only because at the time of the Japanese occupation, where the
Yeah.
witnesses are wearing this bayong over their head, but also
Yes.
this supposed religious figure who is
Yeah.
wearing this infamous figure here in United States. This is
Yes.
better known as the KKK. The Ku Klux
Yes.
Klan
That's
once
right.
upon a
Right.
time were wearing this, and
Hmm.
I think they're still around. They're just not
Yeah.
active, but you know,
But
it's
then in
something like
European
related.
tradition, especially like in Italy,
Mhm.
yeah, this is not actually a portray. I mean, a representation of a negative image, because
Yeah.
you still have like religious orders who put them on.
Mm.
But of course, that wasn't my intention. Being the title being Tres Personas, it's like telling who are the real power in
Okay.
society. So there are those, you have the government, the church, and the mass media in this case. So the mass media is the jester, the church
Mm.
at the central position, and the government on one side. And they're all around. And one might argue, of course, that the church is not as powerful as it used to be. Uh, but I decided to put it this way because, like, the lingering influence of the church is still very much around in terms of how people see their world, how they understand their existence, and that's still very much affected by the influence of the church.
Ayan yung sa baba na hindi natin makita. Wow. And I see that Pinocchio nose once again. Yun ang kaiba pag nakita niyo yung Pinocchio nose na yan. Because I'm gonna show you more of those Pinocchio nose. And now, here we go. So, we're now entering a different, this is not
Oh yeah.
related anymore, no? Or is it?
Well, actually, this is a very recent one. I made this some within this year, and interestingly, this was done just before the outbreak of the pandemic. You know? So in a way, it was a bit eerie in the sense that, like, it seems to have foretold the event. So as you notice, because the central figure is wearing that very familiar image of the plague doctor. So this was during the so-called Dark Ages when they have the plague. And on one hand, he is pointing like something like a toy laser gun at a dodo. So well, it's really saying that we're the ones who are ultimately responsible for our ultimate demise on this planet. So it's our own nature, our greed, our recklessness that will ultimately cause our own end. So on the background, you see symbols of Western civilization, and
Yeah.
the architecture around is suggestive of the what's this Colosseum in Rome.
Oh, this is the Colosseum in Rome. Wow.
Right.
So from the point of view of an artist, how do you even start? Did you first think of the main person and you added the background, or you thought of the background from the very start?
I tend to have no rules when I paint. Sometimes I start with an idea and then I kind of do some sketches towards that. And then when I execute it on the canvas, I totally change my mind sometimes. And then when that happens, I put on a really difficult struggle to overcome the canvas. So it's, I mean, I look at the canvas as an adversary. So like, my attitude is never allow that to overcome you. So I'm very competitive when it comes to that. No? So parang tipong, you must never allow yourself to be beaten by the canvas. So and that's the part of the process I actually like, because it not only kind of gives you the satisfaction of having overcome an adversary, but it also opens up a broader and deeper understanding of other things in life. So the whole idea of the practice is actually so aligned with deepening your outlook. I think if one strives to be relevant in the world today, you just have to participate in the discourses that are taking place, instead of just kind of getting away from society, one is challenged to be very much to take an active part in that discourse. There will always be disagreements. There will always be clashes in terms of perspectives, but that's exactly what it's all about, you know. And and it's also good to give yourself that space. So contemplate and all that. But I guess like one of the reasons probably one might say we exist on this world so that, you know, just like all other living things, we exist to grow. No? You see the plants, they grow. The animals, they grow, and everything grows. No? But as far as humans are concerned, the challenge of growth is not confined to a physiological phenomenon, but we are asked to grow and mature on the more so on the higher aspects of our humanity. No? So you know, we're challenged to be more intelligent. We're challenged to be more thoughtful of and to be more aware of our existence, how we connect to a bigger world, and all that. No, and in this case, sometimes institutions can be obstacles uh, instead of you know, enablers, because some institutions, actually like the church, have a tendency to insist on the observance of certain traditions that are eventually or that are already losing connection and relevance to the times, you know. And but it still plays a vital role, you might say, in terms of being a partner of the state in social control. But control is not necessarily a good thing. You know, control can be like keeping people submissive and compliant to the designs of the powerful, you know, people in society. So one cannot always resist or overcome, say, the oppressive instruments in society by fighting force with force. But it helps if we equip ourselves with better understanding of a lot of things in order to enable ourselves uh, to transcend. No? That's what it's about, I guess. So, you know, I mean, no matter how much, like you start a revolution and then there's always this pattern where eventually, even if you succeed, it reverts back to the old order where ultimately there will always be just a small minority calling the shots. In other words, uh, you know, no matter how democratic you want things are, it will always be run by the tiny 1% in society. So, but it doesn't mean that you're not supposed to do anything anymore. Art gives us that creative space to exercise that experience of transcendence, even within our limited human capacity. You know? So minsan it can be a representation of beauty that goes beyond what we understand in this world, or it can be utterly kind of shocking and disturbing that compels us to appreciate uh, challenges in our lives. You know? So that's the most exciting thing about art, actually. No, it enables one to experience a variety of understanding and encounters. No, it's like a foretaste of possibilities that can be attained, no, by the creative mind. Mhm.
So that really gives me an understanding of your works. Because a lot of times I stare at your works and, my imagination is playing. There's a lot of elements like this one. There's a lot of elements in it, but knowing the mindset of Garibay, now you begin to understand more of his works. So there's also the Coliseo at the background. And these are
Mhm.
your different characters.
Well, yeah, well, this is actually kind of contemplating on where we are at the present. Like we have this uh, government who seems to have no qualms about killing people on the basis of suspicion that they are involved in certain activities, whether it's related to drugs or whether or it can be something that they're associated with a what's this yung it's what you call now red tagging, no? So the slightest hint of you being associated with the left can be very dangerous. So this is the context of that of this particular work. It's a recurrent image that I use because the Colosseum is an arena. So
Yeah.
it's an arena where ideas clash, where powers kind of try to overcome each other. So it's a typical, device used by artists, I suppose. Where they're trying to say some things.
What is the significance of this box here? There's a cube in front.
Well, again, this was during the pandemic, and the idea of being confined in a small space.
Okay.
Yeah, but sometimes, like my works, sometimes I just let my subconscious to take over, and I just kind of relate with forms over the execution of a concept. And then and then eventually you realize, oh, okay, that still makes sense. So it's an exciting process for me. And it's probably the reason why I paint almost every day, because it's like something that you want to keep experiencing over and over again. And I don't really mind not having, say, an active social life or whatever. I can forgo anything as long as I can just keep painting and painting. And that's it.
Thank you, everyone. And until next time, join us again. And sign up now at the Eagle Eye Charities online gallery page. So we will notify you for the next mentoring about the power of human art form. And if you're an artist, this is a must for you. I'm wishing one and all a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And salud. Thank you.